Good evening, everybody. I think we'll get started. Please help yourself to food. I heard one of the students say, wow, this is real food. So maybe they'll actually stay. Yay, okay? Now we know what it is. It's all about having real food for the students to get them here. I want to welcome everyone here this evening. My name is Maggie Ray, and I'm the Director of Student Wellness. And on behalf of myself and Dr. Lee Jones and the Office of Student Affairs, I want to welcome you here tonight to the 26th Annual Wellness Lecture. It's exciting for me to see so many different representations of our community here tonight. I see students, which I'm very excited about, because this is what this is about, is helping not only ourselves but our students learn about resiliency. I see med students, nursing students, I see medical faculty, staff, nursing faculty, so I'm super glad that all of you came out tonight. Before I forget, though, I want to, two things I don't want to forget. I want to welcome virtually, who are hopefully they're beaming us in, our students who are in our San Joaquin Valley Prime program. Hopefully the link to them has worked and the pizza has arrived and they're all gathered together in a room doing a very nice wellness activity, which is hanging out together and watching us here. Also the rural students that I also sent the link to. And also if anyone's on the other side of the causeway at our UC Davis campus, welcome. And I'm glad you could join us. And in the link that I sent everybody virtually, Charlene, who is the master of everything, I've decided. Yes, Charlene. Yes, Charlene. Master of all will take emails from anybody in any of those remote sites who has a question for the dean or for our panel. Obviously I want to thank Charlene Green from the Office of Medical Education for her help. Michelle Silva, thank you for your help from the dean's office, and Angela and Nick as well for getting all the things behind the scenes to get us here and nice real food in the back. So thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad we have such a nice group tonight, and I'm going to take the liberty to assume that if you're here tonight, that you share my thoughts about how important it is for all of us in this room to identify resiliency strategies as we pursue our careers and our work and our jobs. So I hope that you will leave tonight even more convinced of how important that is. And most importantly for our students and young trainees tonight that are here in the room, my goal is for you to leave recognizing how important identifying resiliency strategies is in terms of your professional identity, that is a key piece as you identify where you want to be professionally, who you are. This needs to be a piece of it. So I'll hope you'll leave with that. And one good thing is we're off to a good start in terms of resiliency. We've got good food, so that's a good start. But we're also there's not a ton of randomized controlled trials about the Freischlag has written on this topic about why do some people burn out and why don't they? Why are some resilient and why aren't some? But when you look at one of the studies where they actually looked at physicians who had low burnout and high resiliency, one of the key things that they identified for themselves is sharing ideas and interacting with colleagues and sharing experiences. So that's exactly what we're doing tonight, is gathering together and sharing our stories and ideas about what can make us resilient as we pursue our careers and our jobs. So I'm feeling like we can check that box, okay? We're doing a good job with that. The way the evening is going to go is that we are going to hear from Dean Freischlag, her presentation, and then we're going to assemble our esteemed panel up here in the front where we can hear from them about their stories and their reflections on resiliency and career satisfaction. So let me start by introducing our speaker, who I think everybody in the room does know, but just in case. Dean Freischlag is the Vice Chancellor for Human Health Sciences and the Dean of the School of Medicine at UC Davis. She oversees UC Davis's health system's academic, research, and clinical programs, including the School of Medicine, the Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing, the 1,000-member physician practice group, and the UC Davis Medical Center. Many of you know of Dr. Freischlag's tremendous success as a leader in academic medicine and surgery, but many of you might not know that she also has conducted research and written on the topic of resiliency and career satisfaction, and has an important voice in that area. So we're very pleased that she's leading us in this forum this evening. So thank you.
Well, I'm just delighted to be here, and I hope this will be an uplifting end of your day, because it's Monday, and Monday I always say people wake up on Monday. I get anywhere between 250 and 350 emails, not all of them pleasant on Monday, and therefore Monday tends to be one of those days that go, whew, we're back. But tonight I really want to share with you some of my thoughts about burnout, which actually I got involved with doing the study sort of by default, and also resiliency, which is a talk I gave at one of our meetings this last year in honor of the first woman chair of surgery who died a few years ago and has a named lectureship. And when I think back to it, I didn't know I was resilient as I started this, so you don't have to know right now for your young people that I am resilient. You don't have to be Superman or Superwoman, but you need to know, just like she said, that you need to share these thoughts, because not all of us got here on an easy slide down. It's a journey. It should be a journey that's not a mountain. There should be a ladder. There should be help. There should be friends. And I hope part of my first 2 years, I'll be here 2 years in a week, is to let you know I'm here to help all of you. I meet with many of you one-on-one, and part of it is to let you know I hear you. And I think part of this is to let you hear a little bit about me and where I failed and where I didn't do well, so that you know why you can do that too, that it may not be everything that you wanted to do. But here I am 30 years into a career, and I still have energy. I thought she was going to say you're resilient if you wear pink. That also helps to do that. You've learned about my colors, but also that it's a great life, what we get to do, but it's not always easy. So this is me. Okay, this is me at the University of Illinois as a college person, and that's me as an intern. I look just the same, don't I? I hope you can tell which one's me, not the guy in the back and not Debbie on that, but me right there. And it's really a miracle that I'm here. When I went back to when I was in medical school in March in 1980, I was waiting for my match. I was at Rush University, and they used to hand out little slips then. It wasn't computerized. I had been moonlighting the night before, which is another long story, how they were letting me be a surgical intern and paying me before I graduated from medical school, but that was the 70s, right? You could do all sorts of things. And they skipped my name, and I was horrified. I thought I didn't match, and obviously they made a mistake. And back then I thought maybe they forgot to tell me, which of course they would have told me if I didn't match, but it turned out my slip of paper was on the floor. So of course I asked my best friend in medical school, Bruce, to go up and get that slip for me, which he did, and thank goodness I matched to UCLA. And that was my third choice. I was just delighted that the Windy City didn't take away that slip farther away, and there I was here. However, 20 years later, following my training, I was sitting having a drink with a friend who was a fellow when I had done a sub-internship at UCSF, because that was my number one choice. And I was telling him the story about my match story, and how I ended up at UCLA, and he looked at me and he goes, you know, I've been waiting 20 years to tell you this. And of course, that's always a bad thing. And he told me because the chair of surgery at UCSF had just recently died. And he said, now I can tell you. When we were going through the list for applicants that year in 1979 and 80 to match into surgery, there were 3 women candidates, and they took all 3 women out and never ranked me at UCSF because they weren't going to take women into that program. 1979. I got really mad. I couldn't believe 20 years later, my career's been pretty good. I love UCLA. I was really angry. And actually, there's still a piece right now, you can tell. I'm still a little pissed. And can you imagine that happening? I got taken away something from me I didn't even know till 20 years later. And My grandfather, who was a coal miner, when I was 6 years of age, I skipped first grade in a small town in Illinois, and he looked at me right in my face and said, you know, Julie, they're going to tell you you can't do things, and you're going to tell them you can. And part of it is I was just a little mite, a small little blonde girl, and here we were in Carbondale, Illinois. My one grandfather was a coal miner. My other one made boilers for the railroad. And he said, I was going to face obstacles, and you need to tell them you can do it. And he ended up dying the next year. He probably ruptured an aneurysm, which is another story for another day, as my mother ended up having one. But I didn't remember that either till years ago, when I actually have had things that I didn't get and realized that you need to tell them you can. My mother was a teacher, and inspired by her love for teaching, I entered the University of Illinois to be a teacher, but they closed education and I had to go into pre-med because there were no other choices if you wanted to be a biology high school teacher, and I ended up at Rush Medical School, and I wanted to be a pediatrician. Wouldn't have that been interesting for those of you that are, but I did surgery first to get it out of the way, and I just loved it. And therefore, as you go forward with your life, do what you love, and you'll never regret that. When I interviewed for residency at UCLA that year, I was the only woman in the whole room of men in 1979. I wore a bright green dress because why not show I was there? And Dr. Morton looked around and said, welcome to all you young men. And he shouted out, and one woman. But he ended up taking me, and that was 1979. Now, more than 30 years later, this is the picture of me as chair of surgery at Hopkins. I was there for 11 years, and the picture never changed. This was me with all the other chairs. And as you can tell, I wore red so they could see me, but you can see I was the only woman chair for 11 years there. So diversity was not at the top of the list of trying to get leaders there, and it was actually a very tough time, those 11 years. And I will write about it after a few people die and retire. But what's interesting in that picture, there's 5 of us that now are deans, which actually they're a very good qualified group, but they definitely were my team. And when you go through this kind of bias, which, people have bias, they're going to think of many reasons not to like you, and especially if you're very good, they may do that. You really need to have a good sense of yourself. That's what we're talking about tonight. You have to be fearless. You have to have good mentors. We've talked about that the first year I was here. You have to have a sense of humor, which I've got a pretty good one, and you have to be able to adjust your sales because you're not going to get what you always want. And maybe that's good because you probably don't know what you really need. And that's the miracle while we're all here. All of you have stories similar to mine. Your journey is going to be complex and intense if it hasn't already been. It's physically and emotionally a journey. It affects our families as well, right? We all make huge sacrifices along the way. But despite these challenges and gender bias, despite opportunities of burnout that you're going to have to face, what pushes us to go forward is to be that most amazing physician and scientist. And many of you have heard me say, you just need to be really good. You need to be really good at what you do, and that will get you through. It'll get you through those roadblocks and then those things that get in your way, because the world is perfect. If nothing gets in your way, nothing happens. You're very good, but when something gets in the way, that's when we judge you. So how did I do that? How did I make myself get through all of this? One, I didn't know some of the things people do to you, and that's okay. Did I have tenacity and drive? Or for those of you that know me, yes, I did. I am tenacious. I look really nice and friendly, but for those of you who have seen me when I don't like what you just did, not so much. Was I smart? Yeah, I studied. I got really good grades. I got really good board scores. I really worked hard. But when I look back, I think the key that made me do well is really resilience. Resiliency is always described as the ability to bounce back. Something bad happens and you bounce back. A disruption, something bad. Like losing a job, losing a loved one, not matching to the place you want. But I really think it's at the heart of your ability to grow is to learn from this disruption, and resiliency actually makes you better. So rather than bouncing back, which implies going all the way to the bottom and jumping up, I think it's really bouncing up. I think if you can learn to bounce up every time you hit something bad, you too will have resilience. There's a Latin phrase, Bravio Surgo, which means I rise through adversity. And I think that's what I do. I often quote Albert Einstein, who said, there are two ways to live your life, right? Almost as nothing's a miracle, or maybe that everything's a miracle. In many ways, I think resiliency is that miracle. If you can learn to be a bounce-up person, that you can go through all these roadblocks, whether you know them or not, you'll bounce up and take advantage of all the things you're offered. I knew my job at Hopkins was going to be tough. I was the first woman clinical chair there. It seemed no matter what I did, somebody criticized me. Either I was in the OR too much, I wasn't there too much, I traveled too much, I was in the office. They even talked about my bright colors, which many of you noticed. I wear them most every day. And even for a year, I wore black. So they would quit talking about me to stay away from me. And many people say things aren't the way they used to be. And those first couple years were tough, and I actually went into the Vice Dean for Faculty, Janice Clemens, who many of you have met. She came to visit us and said, you know what, I don't fit in here. I'm going to leave. You know, this has been fascinating, but this is not for me. And she looked at me and she said, I was hired to be different. I was hired not to fit in. I was hired to lead. And she just looked at me. So I rolled up my sleeves, I put on my 5.5 gloves because I have small hands, and did just that with her showing me the way. Great mentor. So resilience is that trait of a leader. It's vital. You have to really draw deep inside to go forward. We've had a few issues since I've been here for 2 years where I've had to dig deep to say, can we do this? Many people bet at Hopkins I'd only last a week, a month, a year. They all lost their money, which was delightful. And for the surgeons in the office, the audience, you know that was true. In 11 years, I really felt we changed the culture. I think bouncing up through resilience is really the way to make this happen. Albert Camus, had a Nobel Prize winning author, called Finding an Invincible Summer in this poem, and I'll read it to you. In the midst of winter, I found that was within me an invincible summer, and that makes me happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me there's something stronger, something better pushing right back, bouncing up. So I chose to pursue the position here because this is a world-class university led by Chancellor Katehi. And if you want to see someone who's bounced up, you need to listen to her story. A female electrical engineer, she overcame huge challenges. Her father said you shouldn't even go to college, and her mother moved her so she could attend college and was only one of 2 females in her undergrad class in Greece. And she had lots of hazing in her field as an engineer, so we just don't own it ourselves in medicine. And she is someone that bounces up, and I saw that in her when I first met her. And she's a great inspiration to all of us with her brave comments and big ideas. You all have chosen a great, rewarding path, and the tools you need to develop to be resilient will make your future career amazing, will make you a great doctor to your patients, and you will feel so fulfilled. So how do you do this? So it's great to say be resilient, bounce up. What tactics can you use? And similar to what she just said, you've got a few things you've got to do. You've got to stay connected. Professional relationships and networking are critical factors in career satisfaction. And my office will tell you I get more outside emails from people than anyone they've ever seen. Just over the weekend, an intern of mine back in 1986 wrote me saying, I hear you're coming to give a talk at Duke in the fall. Do you remember me? My name's Duncan Phillips. I'm a pediatric surgeon. Diana knows him. He goes, of course I remember him. He goes, I remember the very first day we got on your service. I was a brand new fellow. And he said, you walked over to Carlos and I, and you said, if anything goes wrong with any patient anytime, you call me, and I will help you fix it and take care of that patient. I don't remember saying that at all. In fact, I thought he was going to tell me, I was saying, if you don't call me, I'll kill you, right, to do it. This is the 70s, 80s. You know, they were every other night. And he said, in house at that time, that was our call schedule every other night. But he said he's used that for 30 years with his residents because I said I would help you. And a few surgeons that I know around the country continue to connect because that's what we do. And also to stay connected, sometimes you have to take it on your own dime. So last year at our vascular meeting, we always have a women's cocktail party. We always do this. And there wasn't one. So a young vascular surgeon who visited me this year said, well, let's do it. I have an app. We can get everybody by the app and get them to have a flash cocktail party. I said, we can. I said, you do that. And she did. And she got about almost 150 people that showed up for our cocktail party so we could stay connected at the SVS meeting. So sometimes you have to do it yourself. Second, you have to be a mentor. And I see Julie sitting there. You have to find mentors and you have to be one. And that's why the first year I was here, the most important thing is being a mentor. Mentoring builds community. It makes people more successful. And I have tons of mentors. Many of you sitting in this room have guided me throughout my career. And some mentors will support you early on. Others you need later. Sometimes you flip and now you're the mentee and the mentor. But you need lots of mentors. And you have to give back. Someone mentored you, you must mentor. Someone taught you, you must teach. And we all need champions to say, yes, you can do that. I was with one of the fourth-year medical students this morning as she was choosing her rank list, and don't worry, I won't use your name because you're sitting in the audience. And basically she told me what program she wants, and I said, that's fine. I emailed the program director and said, she wants to go there. And that's what you do as a mentor. You do it. I think she was a little shocked as I sat there and did it. She did answer me, so things are good. So I think that giving other people chances right then gives you humanity. Taking chances gives you resilience. And you've got to practice what you preach. You have to help those around you. Someone asked if I ever get tired of doing that, of helping people and promoting their careers. And I thought, my goodness, that is why I come to work every day. You have to decide why you come to work every day. And I come to work every day to help others have a great life. And I love watching the students grow, faculty, residents, making amazing discoveries, teaching, doing research, taking care of patients. It's like watching your children succeed, but what's different is they actually listen to you, unlike your children who go, you don't know much, or my father who just had a fempop bypass and a toe amputation last night, or this morning when I was talking, he goes, do you really know much about these procedures? I'm like, okay, go see Dr. Dotson. I'm sure he's smarter. But part of it is you all make us so proud. So, third, be a good colleague. Be a good person. I have a plaque in my office that says nice matters, and I live by it. Listen more than you talk. Do more than expected. Praise peers more than yourself. And supporting each other through teamwork, listening to each other, leaning on each other, they're so important to career satisfaction and resiliency. And it's easier to face challenges when you know you have others on your side. And I have always been nice to people. I really have never benefited from taking advantage of others or not being kind. And sometimes you do have to bloom where you're planted. You know, I wanted to go to UCSF. I didn't realize I wasn't in the mix at that time, but I went to UCLA and it turned out pretty good. You know, that I ended up having a great career and great friends. And you need to appreciate not only your successes, but challenges. You got to keep a good sense of humor. You have to be who you are. You can't wear black every day if you're a pink person. You know, you got to wear your pink, and you got to enjoy your job along the way. And that also makes you have better well-being. So that does lead me to this. So if you're one of these top 10, I'm sorry, but this is where you are. These are the top burnout rates just published last week. As you notice, surgery's not on them. I'm not sure why. They probably didn't count right. But when you look at who has opportunity for burnout, it's actually those with an urgent emergency services, very busy, and for those that see lots of patients, perhaps with problems that can't be solved. And a recent published Mayo Clinic survey found that burnout and satisfaction worsened from 2011 to 2014. And now maybe half of us are looking at professional burnout. Maybe our expectations are wrong. Maybe we're expecting too much to make that happen. But basically, we need to think about and talk about that it's there. And no other people are experiencing it too, so you don't feel bad that you're the only one that feels sort of bad today. So what are those symptoms? And it's characterized in people that you think are the best doctors you know. If you see the best doctor you know, they frequently are the ones that are burned out. They're exhausted emotionally. They get depersonalized with patients and coworkers. They have a sense of lack of accomplishment. They treat people as objects. They feel depleted. They're physically exhausted. And then, if it gets worse, they end up with poor judgment, cynicism, guilt, and feeling of ineffectiveness. And medical errors resort from this too as well. So you need to watch out for yourself as well as others and keep an eye out for two common symptoms. Treating patients and colleagues as objects, especially when they used to be a really nice person, and all of a sudden they're not a nice person anymore. And feeling depleted, that you just can't quite get through the day, even if it's not a Monday. You know, that's what you want to do, and that these are the things you need to pay attention to. Now, recovery from burnout is possible, and you can talk and get treated, but prevention is the best strategy. So you need to learn to actively nurture and protect your personal and professional well-being. Your physical, stay in good shape. I've lost 8 pounds since I came here. I love living in Sacramento because you're all so healthy. I had to keep up, to do it. So walking, exercising is good. Emotional, making sure you do things you enjoy. I'm a crafter, as many of you know, and I just finished making a new outfit for my granddaughter for the Easter season, and I made it myself, and it actually makes me so I feel I accomplished something, and I love making outfits for her. And then psychologically and spiritual, reading books, taking that few minutes in the morning to meditate, which I do now as I wake up, to think about what is so priceless and wonderful about my life. Start now. Start bouncing up now, so when it gets tougher and you lose a patient, or you don't get a grant, or that you don't get the job you wanted, or someone takes you out of the rank order list because they didn't really like the looks of you, that you actually can bounce up and you'll be good. A medical career is challenging, but it's the best ever. Trying to take some of the negativity and put it into positive is exactly what you need to do. And I want you to look for gifts in every challenge that's thrown to you. That early in my career, I had to work hard. I looked at like 8 chair positions. I've looked at about 9 dean's positions. And I always thought, I could choose whatever I wanted and everybody would love me. Not so true. If you don't like somebody, they don't like you. I learned that. It took 50 years. But I think part of it is learning that things you don't get are just important as things as you do get. And because of that, I was able to adjust my sales, and I ended up here. And what a great gift being at UC Davis is. So, in conclusion, each of us are going to find obstacles and challenges, great and small, in our careers. General Patton once said he didn't measure a man or woman's success by how high he climbs, but how high he bounces when he hits the bottom. So even he knew that bouncing up is important. So I wish you all strength, resiliency, well-being, and bounce higher, even when you don't get what you want. Thanks so much.
As everyone's sitting down, I just want to echo before when people were arriving, and I was nicely looking at the audience and seeing, my people, my colleagues that I'm lucky that I work in more than one area in the hospital and at the school, so I've got groups of people. And when I looked out and saw them, I realized, I feel good about tonight because I've got that sense of collegiality and friendship that really does keep us going. So let me introduce our panel. Dr. Peter Yellowlees is the Vice Chair for Faculty Development and Professor of Psychiatry at the University of California at Davis, and he's the Chair of the UC Davis Medical Staff Wellbeing Committee. These are going to be short, so that's why I put them in the program, because I knew I wasn't going to do justice to everybody's story. Dr. Lattimore, is Associate Dean of Medical and Resident Diversity at the UC Davis School of Medicine, and in this role, he oversees the Office of Student Resident and Medical Student Diversity. Dr. Cheryl Katz is a professor at the Betty Irene School of Nursing at UC Davis. Dr. Katz currently serves as the elected chair of the School of Nursing Faculty Executive Committee and is a member of the Nursing Science and Healthcare Leadership Graduate Group Executive Committee. That's a long title for your committee. And Dr. Angie Hood is a senior resident in internal medicine and will be chief next year. And I just want to give a personal shout out to Dr. Hood because she has designed and implemented a lovely study within the Department of Medicine with the residents on looking at burnout. And I'm pleased that I was able to participate. And she gave the residents, half the group of residents, a mindfulness intervention, and the other half not so mindful in intervention, and nothing mean or anything like that. Just a general well-being, so we're excited to hear about. Now she's becoming our resource on the campus about mindfulness. So I'm excited that you did that project. So what we're going to do is ask the panel to reflect on this topic of resiliency and career satisfaction. And I think probably what we're going to do is pose a question, or I will pose a question to the panel and give them a chance to respond, and then we'll wait till everyone gets a chance, and then we'll take questions for everybody. Just so I want to be sure everyone on the panel gets a chance to tell their story. Dr. Lattimore, do you want to begin? And the question I'm asking people to think about tonight is just to reflect on, as Dean Freischlag did, what you recognize for yourself or your colleagues have been strategies that have worked in terms of maintaining your resiliency. And oh yes.
So whoever the timekeeper is, feel free to rein me in, okay?
Okay, I will.
So I have six.
That would be me. So I'm going to put Charlene on that one.
Okay, so I actually listed 6 things, but I'm going to probably talk about a few. So I would say the first and most importantly is to love what you do. I'm not going to say that I love every piece and aspect of my job because I have strengths and I have weaknesses, but I can say that a significant part of my job truly nurtures me on a daily basis. And if anything keeps me resilient and keeps me coming back, it's that part of the job. I would say secondly, I'm always thinking about the end game, not the moment, but what really, really, truly is the goal in the long run, and the future. So when I'm looking over that horizon called my future, I'm looking at the road. I'm not looking at all the walls. I'm not looking at all the obstacles. I'm looking at the path to get to wherever, for me, is the end game. The dean talked about mentors and advisors and coaches. I'm going to lump them all together, and I'm going to say a couple things. One, I'm going to say a really good mentor or advisor, someone who tells you the truth, really is honest about your shortcomings, but immediately tells you where they see you in the future. And then third, and most importantly, where I think a lot of us fall short, actually helps you develop a roadmap to get there. As an ethnic minority and LGBT person, have I always or have I frequently had mentors or advisors that look like me or talk like me? In all honesty, very infrequently. And has that honestly truly mattered? No. Really honestly, I've had incredible mentors and advisors who have saw in me things that I saw resiliency at my lowest moments that I absolutely did not see. But again, they saw where I was, they helped me understand where I could be, and they helped me develop a plan to get there. Self-reflection is where I'm going to stop. And this is probably the area I had to work on the most, in all honesty. But in order to be resilient, you got to be honest with yourself. Really, truly, you got to know what your weaknesses are. You got to know what your strengths are. You got to know the areas that you need to work on. And most importantly, you got to know where you need help. Not that we're supposed to be putting a plug in for anyone, but if you haven't done some work around your emotional intelligence, Danielle Goodman would be a very good place to start. And I think I'm going to stop there. But some of these things really honestly have helped me stay resilient through what I say all the time, trials, tribulations, and downright failures.
Thank you. So I was reflecting a little bit differently about what's resiliency in careers, and thinking about people that I've mentored as well as myself. The way I think about the sort of reflection that's needed is more about making sure that you take the time to reevaluate periodically, what your career progress has been and what your goals are, and how flexible you need to be in order to take advantage of new opportunities. But some of the best advice I've ever gotten was to make your own luck, you know? So, I remember early in my career, I was, applying for postdoctoral fellowships as I graduated from graduate school, and a few faculty positions. And I went to interview for a position that was a fellowship, and they invited me back to interview for a faculty position because they just serendipitously had gotten a grant funded and they needed someone at a faculty level to be the project director. And it turned out the director of that research center, I had been nice to his secretary at a different institution. Unbeknownst to me, he called her up and said, "What kind of person is this?" And so they invited me back. But it was luck. But what made the difference is I had had enough publications as a graduate student to make that possible. So there's things that you can do, whether it's seeking out, training on a new procedure or writing that extra paper as a student that really can kind of pave your way. So I remember even as a young assistant professor, I worked at a medical school as an assistant professor rather than a nursing school. And I made time to teach at the local university, just undergraduate classes in health psychology. And that's what made the difference, 20 some years later when I applied here, I had a few teaching credentials that I wouldn't have otherwise had. And so you just never know what you might need at some point in your career. So it's nice to, I think, cast a broad net. But I think the final thought I would leave you with is it really makes a difference if you're able to surround yourself with people that you trust, and whether it's peers or people who are senior to you, that you can have candid conversations with and talk about where you're going and what you're doing. And that can help with networking, but it can also help with sort of your quality of life around you. And I think of all the things I could say about how to be resilient, that's probably the take-home message. And with that, I'll pass it on.
So I'm still in residency, so I feel like I don't have a lot of years to reflect back on and sort of big picture. But on a day-to-day basis, I think when you're on the wards and it's been a busy day, I think being kind to yourself, and I don't mean necessarily getting to go have a cookie or like doing that, but sometimes that's true too. But I think at the end of the day, some days are going to be good, but a lot of days are going to be really rough, and sometimes that feels out of your control. And some days I think a lot of us feel that it reflects on yourself. And I think more and more kind of learning to like love yourself and be kind to yourself and say, okay, that was a rough day. And maybe it wasn't what I imagined for myself for this day, but tomorrow's a different day. And here are the things I did good. Here's things I'm going to try not to do tomorrow. And tomorrow's a new day. I'm going to put on some nice clothes tomorrow and come in strong. And so I think loving yourself. And then I agree with kind of working with your colleagues who are going through the same thing and reaching out for each other. So even on like a small day-to-day basis, saying, look, I had a rough day. What do you think about this happened? Yeah, that happened to me too. And so kind of reflecting back and saying, that's okay. Today was rough. Tomorrow will be better. And I'm going to be really strong for this later. So kind of that, I like the bouncing up in analogy for that reason.
Okay, well, I'm going to be the fourth person in this group, I guess. I mean, to answer the question, there's no, from my perspective, it's really very straightforward. Just find the right life partner, love them, and be with them. And I think, to me, that's the most important single thing by a very long way. Having said that, I'm going to tell a couple of stories. And in fact, Dean Freischlag, we had a very similar but sort of opposing career at medical school, because whilst we were at medical school at the same time, and whilst you were over in the States, I was in London, and I went to the Royal Free Hospital School of Medicine, which was a school of medicine that was set up purely for females. And so the Royal Free... and by the time I arrived, they had just started admitting men. And I was actually in the second group of men that was admitted to this female medical school. So when I was admitted, there were 20 men in our year and about 80 women. And almost all the faculty were female. So the biggest single problem is we had a terrible rugby team. And that's spoken from a male perspective, clearly, although we actually did play mixed rugby, believe it or not. So all of my early mentors were females, and the most memorable person was actually a very well-known liver physician called Dame Sheila Sherlock, who many people will know, and she wrote a lot of the original books on liver pathology and described sort of chronic active hepatitis and hepatitis C and a number of other related issues. And I got to know her quite well as a medical student, basically not because I actually was a sort of very active medical student. I actually played cricket semi-professionally. And so come the summer, I was playing cricket 5 days a week. And this was the 70s. You could do that at medical school in the 70s. And I was also the student union president. And so, and I got to know Dame Sherlock quite well through my student union work. And she knew that I hadn't been on awards a great deal, but that I was able to sort of learn things rapidly the night before the exams. And this is a story that was actually written up in the Lancet after she died. So I was actually doing my oral exams in medicine in my 4th year, after supposedly 3 months spent doing medicine during the summer, which was hopeless for me because I was playing cricket. and so Dame Sherlock decided that she would actually examine me, because I was also the student president, and so, she wanted to see what I was like. And she asked me a very simple first question. She said, just tell me 3 causes of a large liver. And I thought, well, I knew what 3 reasonable causes were, but I thought I knew her, and I knew that she was actually had a very good sense of humor. So I said, beer, wine, and whiskey. And she passed me. Yes, that's not the story for today's medical students. But the bottom line is that she then gave me her intern's job when I qualified and became a mentor for me long term. And so I found that learning from someone like that, who was a world-renowned person, you could have a sense of humor. You didn't have to be sort of bad to people. You didn't have to be difficult, and you could allow people to take chances. I took a big chance with that answer. So overall, what I learned from many of these very, very well-known female mentors was, first of all, I always say yes to something, philosophically. And I basically will try anything. I may only do it for a year or something like that, but I don't turn things down. And I also look for solutions. And I try not to present problems. And I think Dr. Hales is sitting there, and hopefully he'll agree with this. But I think those are 2 very important things for anyone to do when they're trying to have a career in medicine. Take a sort of good, positive approach and try and present solutions to whatever situation you're in.
All right. Well, hopefully the students in the room won't leave thinking you play cricket and drink beer, wine, as the take-home from this evening's presentation. But certainly I hope they hear one thing that I just want to reflect on before we take questions is certainly relationships from all of you is a key piece to resiliency. Relationships with mentors, relationship with your family, relationship with your colleagues, with your friends. So clearly something that you all share and that I want to emphasize. Would anyone like to pose a question to the panel? Dr. Service.
So my question may be a little tough, but you seem like a resilient group.
Oh, he's thrown the gauntlet down there. There we go.
So in the New England Journal last week, there was the published article about the randomized trials changing duty hours, where you could have more flexible duty hours in half of the general surgery programs. And they were looking at outcomes. And it speaks to an interesting issue around burnout, which is what is the right approach to preventing burnout? Because one of the thoughts about restricting duty hours was that this was going to help with burnout. It was primarily for patient safety and quality improvement, but in the back of our minds, we thought, well, limiting those long hours and decreasing the incredible workload that interns and residents experience would be helpful. But at least to date, that hasn't proven to be the case. That in fact, burnout seems to be on the rise in residents in these programs. So I wonder if you have thoughts about that. You've commented on things that contribute to resilience, like relationships, but what do you think about the structural changes, like reducing the amount of time at work and things of that nature in addressing the problem of burnout? So tough question.
I'll start with that. Actually, I'm on the New England Journal of Medicine panel that started today to comment on that article. So they put 10 of us experts, and no one's asked a question yet today, where when I was on this other one, they were questions all over the place. It's actually, people are a little scared to touch it because it wasn't a perfect study. It is surgeons, and it actually came from one of my societies of trying to look, and we actually participated here at UC Davis. And so I think there's two things that come to mind with mine is expectations. You know, how do you manage expectations when you're teaching and training? And if the end game, which you so eloquently talked about, is to be a very good surgeon, very good endocrinologist, everyone's path is going to be a little different, a little longer, a little special. You may have a little bit harder time tying a knot than someone else. You may not be able to do it, and that you need to have that self-reflection to know what do you personally need to do to be good. And that actually has nothing to do with time, maybe some case numbers, but it has to do with you learning your craft well. The one thing that I thought was good about that study was when I trained, we stayed in every other night, and I can't tell you the number of times that we waited for people and we wasted our time and we sat there and we did jobs that really weren't part of what a resident should be doing. I could do all sorts of tasks. Pushing a gurney was one I was really good at. I did a barium enema once because there was no radiology. I mean, there was many things we did that were intriguing. So I think really making sure that there's flexibility to finish what you're doing to completion. I think my key is how I got through training, which was every other night in house and all that stuff, which we thought was good to be exhausted and go operate on someone. I would highly not recommend that anymore, was learning to turn it on and off. So whatever your hours or whatever you're doing, you feel comfortable when you leave the hospital that you were able to put your care into a team that would take care of that patient. You feel confident that they will take care of that patient, and you can turn it off and go enjoy your family or your other activities, because you're going to have to learn how to do that as a real doctor, that you have to turn it on and off. And the people that I've seen get in more trouble can't ever turn it off, that they actually fret all the time. They don't feel anyone else can take care of their patient. If I leave the hospital, someone will die. I've heard that many times out of mouths of people that train me. And so I think it's the turn off and turn on piece that's more important than maybe the absolute hours. And I do think we've learned that if there's nothing going on, everybody can go home. I mean, it's almost that simple to do that. And also our teamwork. But I do think there's a little expectation there that perhaps that everyone can be trained with the same intensity and amount. And not everyone's going to be able to do that. There are some natural people that learn quickly things, and there's some that it's going to take you a little longer. So that self-reflection, that self-expectation, I think is the most important part, that you really want to get really good in training, and therefore whatever it takes, and to have the ability when you leave to have that ability to turn it off.
You're completely right, of course. But just to sort of continue that process, I think one of the things that I've found most useful is actually learning that you are not irreplaceable. I mean, I think that's really important, but it's okay to be away or to have a day off or to sort of do something different. And nobody, absolutely nobody, is irreplaceable. And that, to me, philosophically, once you really know that, then actually life is much easier. And it means that you can then do your best and work hard, and I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. But that, if you go and break your leg, or you decide you want to take a particular amount of time off, the world will go on. And I think that's really important in terms of not sort of having too much burnout. The other thing that I do with patients, which I think is really important, I see a wide range of patients, including quite a number of physicians, is I get them to actually try and work out their career in 5-year bits. So I'll say, what's your plan for the next 5 years? What are your goals for the next 5 years? I think it's completely unrealistic to go longer than that because life happens. But if you can, in fact, work out some goals and some objectives for yourself, and then you can decide what are the most important things. Where do you want to focus on? So even if you're having a bad day, there's actually a wider reason for you having a bad day because it's actually you're doing something that's going to lead to a greater goal. So I think trying to get some sort of career goals or personal or life goals is really important.
I think when I became interested in resident burnout, I was looking at the studies, and I was struck by the fact that some of the most interesting studies were on mindfulness, on like primary care providers. And primary care providers you don't initially think are spending long hours or staying late, but they're still having quite high rates of burnout. So it's not a time issue. It seems like what you're experiencing while you're at work and kind of the structure of the health system is like wearying in some way. And if mindfulness is helpful, kind of trying to backtrack, I don't know. I think that's one of the things we need to keep exploring, but what is it about that lends itself to resiliency and things along that nature? And so I wonder if sometimes it's what we're seeing in our patients and we're frustrating health systems and we get kind of caught up in this system and sometimes stopping and like really being there with the patient and really being there in the medicine that we love, then there's something in that too. And so it's not a matter of hours spent, but in how you're experiencing your patient care and whether you're finding joy in it or not, and how you get there. So I think it's more complicated than just duty hours.
Well, I'll admit I only read the abstract that came through. I didn't read the whole article. But the first thing that came to my mind was, have the students or the interns and residents just been moonlighting more since my day? Because I remember my colleagues, they would get a whole, day off, and they'd go to some community hospital in another town and work in the emergency medicine department, moonlighting to get extra experience and cash. And I guess I've always assumed that when they changed the rules that people just fill that space. So I wondered if they controlled for that. But I think really it speaks to the idea of that's been raised about, being able to turn things off and turn things on. I mean, I know my new role model for that was a colleague at one of the other UCs who had a vacation email that was just wonderful, sort of highlighting, how of course one should be on vacation and attending to one's family, but naturally that didn't mean that you wouldn't answer urgent emails, but to be sure and let them know, whether it really was urgent and to use your judgment about that, And so I think this is something that people struggle with. And so, when someone invited me to come be part of this panel, I was on vacation with my family, so I didn't answer. When I returned, I apologized and said, sorry, I was on a family vacation, and now I'll be glad to come to your panel. So I think, you can learn from colleagues who you see doing functional things like that. I'm not so sure that residents see functional well-being in front of them all the time. And so, no offense, but I think that's why it's important to have forums like this. But from my perspective as a psychologist, just because that study suggested there might not be safety issues doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea to make changes like that.
I didn't read the article, so I'm going to answer a different question, which is actually sort of kind of an offshoot to what she just said. I had issues more with burnout when I would take work home at night and on the weekends. And it's very interesting. I had to learn that about myself. I can answer emails day, night, weekend. It doesn't bother me. But when I would bring a stack of work home, I couldn't relax at home. There was no separation between work and home at all. So even when I'm trying to watch TV, I'm sitting there looking at the stack, et cetera, et cetera. And so I found that if I really need to work, just get in my car and come to work, put in my couple of hours and then go home. But that separation has done wonders for keeping me resilient and allowing me to truly rest when I am quote unquote off.
Time is up. I'm sorry we didn't get more chance for more questions, but I just want to sort of respond because I think, Angie, part of why there's this rush to look at mindfulness is because of what all of you are talking about. Because in each case, what you're saying is that we have to practice being a bit more mindful. So, okay, I'm at work, but now I'm leaving now. They don't need me, and I'm going to be present for something out there, whether it's my cat, my dog, my kids, my meal, whatever it might be. The same thing when you're home, if you're completely thinking I should be working on that stack, you're not mindful for your good TV show, are you? So the idea is, I think, and we're so connected right now, and we feel this pressure to be connected constantly. So I think that's a big task that all of us in the room, physicians, nurses, staff, whatever we are in this room, that's something we all face about how to be present for where we are in the moment. So speaking of which, I'm going to...
I need to make that announcement.
Oh, you do need to, okay. Okay, we're going to make an announcement, and then I'm going to show you one last thing, please.
So in thinking about what we could have as our theme for next year, this year it's inclusion excellence. Last year was mentorship. Next year we're going to make it health and wellness. And so that's for ourselves, our patients, and for our community. So it'll be health and wellness. We all thought that was a great thing to come out of this lecture. So you're the first to know.
Hot off the
that
press.
It'll be health and wellness for next year.
Thank you so much. Obviously, I'm pleased and excited about that as being our initiative. I wanted to leave you, first of all, thank you so much, Dean Freischlag, and our panel for coming tonight and for sharing your personal reflections on how to be resilient. And I think it's also a reminder about how important it is for us to share our stories and share our stories with each other and share our stories with our students and because it really, that makes it helps us resonate, and so I want us to continue to do that. Speaking of sharing our stories, I wanted to end with a reading of an excerpt from a recent piece one of our medical students, Fiona, are you here? No, okay. She gave me permission to read this. She's a wonderful student and does a lot of writing and blogging for her fellow students. And so I asked her, actually not related to this panel, to write something that I could post on the wellness website. Some of her stuff is a little racy, so I was having her to try to do the PG version because it goes out there to the big world out there. As you see, it's up in front of you. It was lovely to see that so early in her career, she's identified something, even as a second-year medical student, that she feels is going to help her maintain resiliency, which is trying to maintain her connection to her family. She writes, my New Year's resolution, swear less, drink more water, and for the love of God, stop eating chips in bed, have long since gone out the window. Mine too, Fiona. So I'm going to make a new one right now, one that doesn't include walking 10,000 steps a day. No, my new promise to myself is to make time to talk to and spend time with my family. They are the reason I'm in medical school to begin with. I will make them proud. But I will also make time to listen about how crowded Trader Joe's was, or the cute thing that our dog did, or the weird cubicle mate my dad has. Those are just as important as anything that could ever be on step one. As physicians, it will be our job to give people back to their families. We fight to give our patients healthy years so they can spend them with the people they love. We recognize that that is what life is really about, and that's why we work so hard to earn our degree. So do me a favor, pick up the phone, call your family, your friends, tell you to love them, and I think you'll find it's just what the doctor ordered. So I thought that would be a nice way to end.